Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Community Conversations. A call to action. Joining me are two extremely special guests, friends of mine for a very long time now. And we are going to get into a really, I feel, important, timely, and critical conversation about raising Black, Brown, and Indigenous children during this era where we have the confluence of COVID-19, which is a health pandemic, and even more visibility that has been brought to deeper issues around racism and police brutality and whiteness. So that's just how it is. At the height of the explosion of COVID and everyone being forced into quarantine back in the beginning of March, I think it was, my immediate thoughts went directly to parents. And it's just immediately where my mind went to, because I'm like, what are people who have children gonna do right now? Like, the kids are out of school, and some parents, if they are not essential workers, then, how are they generating an income? You know what I mean? Like, and if it's just a single parent, or if it's two, who are both experiencing this sort of economic chaos, on top of everything else, like, how are people handling this? And so that was really the impetus behind me wanting to, have a space in which I could bring together folks to talk about this. But more specifically, as our world started to go deeper and deeper into quarantine, and then back in, I believe it was May, with everything that exploded with Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, and I mean, just the list goes on and on and on. Then my mind really started to question, how are Black, Brown, and Indigenous parents having these conversations with their children, and what are the fears? Are they more heightened than they previously were? That's just where my mind has been. So I wanted to create a space and an opportunity for parents who are Black and Brown and Indigenous to talk about that. Amar, talk to me a little bit, just overall, how have you and your family been doing overall throughout this entire year thus far, with the collision of both of these pandemics that I mentioned before, COVID-19, and then also these explosions of white supremacy, racism, police brutality, et cetera, et cetera. How have y'all been doing overall?
That's a good question. I mean, this kind of happened for a lot of us overnight. I know I was traveling for some work in March, the beginning of March, and some friends were asking, like, is it going to get bad? We kept checking with each other, is it going to get bad here? And then when I came back from traveling, I think that week my kids were sent home on Friday, and they were like, you're not coming back to school. And you'll be back in 3 days. And then it changed to, you'll be back after spring break. And then, after that, it was just like, we'll figure it out. So it's been pretty tough, I think, overall, for myself, 2 kids, my partner. But at the same time, like, I can't, like, I hate to complain, because we are very blessed. We're pretty fortunate to have a space that we can call our home. Like, it's not small, like, we're not crammed in somewhere. And so we have space to move, right? Like, so we have space to move around, which I think is extremely important when you're confined together. Like, the first, I think March was very difficult, where it was like really serious. We're not leaving this house at all. And it still is pretty much very serious. But I think we've gotten used to that. But March was really difficult. And so, there were times where it was like, we all need to separate from each other and go to a different room or go outside. And we have, space outside to go out and move around in. So we're pretty fortunate to have that. I think the other thing I want to mention is we're also pretty privileged to both have, my husband has a job, I have a job, where we are we were sent home as well. So that second week of March, both of us were sent home. We had limited resources to continue working, but we were still, we still have a job. We still have an income that's coming in where we can be with our children. So that first month was pretty difficult trying to navigate it. And then, the kids had to start school again in April, right after spring break. So that became very challenging as my work had, that was the busiest time for me, one of the busiest times for my husband. And then like taking turns trying to navigate our education for the kids, right? Because they're doing distance learning. So how do we do that? But I think overall, like it's been difficult. The stress has been pretty high. But I'm acknowledging that we're extremely privileged to have a space, right? We have a home where we have an income, we have a yard, and then we also have the support within each other. And then I know we'll talk about later, but we also have family support that are able to help us and that have been able to come in and really swoop in on like very critical times over the last like couple months.
Yeah. That's so wonderful. And I'm so happy to hear it too. Yeah, I can't imagine what that initial shock, with COVID-19, must have been, like you said, with the school saying that the kids were sent home on a Friday. And then I think it's the not knowing, that really disturbed and disrupted so many parents. And it's like, okay, what do we do next? Quinton, overall, can you talk a little bit about how have you and your family been throughout this whole year with the collision of COVID-19? How did you all react to it initially? And, also with everything that emerged in the last couple of months with these explosions with racism and racist encounters, police brutality, et cetera. Like overall, how have y'all been?
Okay. Well, I got a little bit, I heard a little bit of what Amar was saying. So I'll just kind of pick up on some of that. Like for me, I always want to talk about this time and related to the real experiences that I have, right? I'm obviously a Black person in America, a Black man in America. And that comes with a lot of challenges, obviously. However, our family has a lot of privilege. We're both college educated. I have 2 degrees. We're homeowners. So, I think this is playing out a lot different for my family than like some of my family members who live back home in Cleveland and don't have the same type of resources. So I think that's always a big factor. It's unfortunate. I have a mindset that everybody should be able to own a home if that's what they choose to desire to do. This is not something that should be a luxury or should be a privileged thing. Like we should all be able to support ourselves and our families, and especially during times like this. So I'll say that first of all. And so even with that, obviously, we're human beings,
Right.
So there are challenges. But again, for me, at the time, this is just the truth of it. At the time when the pandemic happened, I was actually on my way on a sabbatical from work.
Right.
I was headed off for a 3-month sabbatical. It's supposed to be a time where we refresh and renew and, come back strong. The work that I do as an organizer and a director of a nonprofit that focuses on justice and ecology is really tiring work. A lot of times we're away from our families for long periods of time. Doing retreats and whatnot. But anyway, point is, we have a sabbatical policy at our company, and I was really looking forward to it, and I remember it was in March, and I remember having my last kind of conversation with my coworkers, like, handing out different pieces of work, and we were all sitting around the table joking. The NBA had just shut down, and we was all sitting around the table and was like, man, I heard they're going to close the schools. And we was like, whatever, ain't going to close the schools, man. That'd be crazy. We all thought it wasn't that serious. We thought it wasn't that serious. And then I remember we were joking. It was like, man, I hope your sabbatical doesn't turn into a sadatical. You have to take care of your kid the whole time. I was like, yeah, that would be so wild. And I had all these plans and shit. I was like about to go travel and shit.
Man, listen.
Yeah, I had sabbatical. I love that.
I had plans, but the universe had other plans, and we all know who wins.
Man, listen, every time.
Undefeated.
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 So, I mean, long story short, the Monday my sabbatical began is the day that the schools closed.
Yeah.
And so
Man.
it was wild for me because like I had to grapple with that, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, okay, it is a privilege, but shit, I earned that one. And I was like, cool,
Yeah.
you know, I've been working here for a while. And so I had to like really like center myself and be like, yo, bro, this is not about you. I know it feels personal.
Yeah.
It's personal.
Right.
They're
Like,
coming for you, Q.
right. I was at the time one of the only Black people in my group. Everybody else had a sabbatical.
I know where you're going. I know where you're going.
So, you know, I had, first of all, for me, I had to like center and ground myself in the reality of what's happening. Like, this is not about you. It feels personal.
Yeah.
It's not. And then I had to like help my son navigate these changes, right? Like, and we never knew. Like, that's the whole thing. Nobody knew anything,
Nobody
right?
knew.
So everybody's all like, oh, we're gonna do this for a little bit, and we're back in a couple of weeks, and it's like, so
no.
like, you know, it went from like this is temporary to like, nah, this is what it is, and then like actually you're not even gonna see your teacher again. It's like, this is wild. Like, you ain't see none of your friends again, see none of your teachers. But my son was happy about it. He liked being at home. He liked being at home. He liked being able to go on Zoom, get off, and then go play basketball.
Right.
So for him, he's loving it.
Yeah.
But it's been difficult for us, you know, just trying to manage everything. And I am back at work now, you know, that was earlier. But, you know, just trying to manage the household. My partner, Martina, she's working in the house. He's here. He sees her. And he's like, well, shit, you know, I go talk to mom. Like, nah, mommy's working. And, you know, it's kind of like trying to figure out the space in the house. Like, where do you set up an office? You know what I'm saying? Like, where do you put things and try to keep things normal for him? But, you know, and then it's like, he's on a Zoom call, she's on a Zoom call, I'm on a Zoom call.
You're on a Zoom call, man.
Right. So the internet's going wild. It's like stressful. That's it, stressful. Those first couple of months was just very stressful. Just very stressful. And then
go ahead.
I mean, and then for me, like school ended. And then I went back to work. So I'm just now really getting a taste of, you know, what it's like to work and do all this. I was still doing some other stuff that I do on the side, but it wasn't my main thing. So like now I'm getting all of this delayed stress that my friends and my coworkers were telling me about back in, you know, April. Like, yo, this is wild, man. I don't understand how we're supposed to make this happen. So,
that was actually one of my follow-up questions too. Like, how have you all been managing what I can only imagine is just anxiety and stress, and I think it's the unknown, right? And both of you mentioned it too. Like, you didn't know what was going to come next, right? And I know just for myself as a single person, y'all know I don't have any kids, but like I literally told someone like, I have to take this whole thing pretty much like 1 week to the next. And y'all know, like, I'm a long-term planner. I haven't been able to do any of that really. So it's like, I don't even know what the next week is going to look like because things shift from one day to the next. So, you know, you talked a little bit about it, Quinton, like you had to recenter yourself and shift your focus a lot to kind of accommodate, you know, the new change. So what about you, Amar? How have you been able to just process your feelings and emotions in a really like authentic, you know, sort of way?
I mean, I said it earlier, like there's been a lot of crying. Like, I'm not lying here. Like, I cry a lot. I'm already a sensitive person, like super Cancer. Like, I hold it all together. And then like, you know, as soon as I feel like it's okay, I'm like bawling, right? You know, just a good release of crying. But it's been super stressful. Like, it not like, you know, for me, the extreme busy time was like through April through June, like nonstop work, non-support with like the technology, and then having to meet goals, you know, without the resources to do it, right? And then my nature is, or my thought process, like, I'm going to find a way to get it done. Like, me and my staff have this like co-led effort where we will find a way to get stuff done. So, you know, that means like probably harming ourselves to do it, right? Like stressing out, working 12, 13-hour days, like going into the office, putting our families and ourselves at risk because we needed to get stuff done. But like I said, I had support, so that helped, right? Like there was a lot of support from my partner, who, you know, was like, you're gonna do this, you'll figure it out, I got the kids, you go do this for a while, you know. So it was like a lot of navigating that. But the stress for me has been super high. Like June, I mean, I must have cried every single day, like, you know. And after it was like letting it go, I was like, okay, I can move on. And I feel like yesterday, like it just kind of, a lot of stuff came to a head. But being able to be okay with, in Spanish we say like a chiona, being a crybaby, and just being like, oh, I'm all right now. Like I can release it, because that's how I process things, is being able to release it. And I think the other part that's been pretty challenging is, so we have 2 small children. It's allowing them to like be and have whatever type of feeling reaction that they need to have also, right? Because as a parent, like we were in this motion of, they went to school, we see them, you know, 10 hours later, you know, so now we're all in it together. So also allowing like myself to have like a really crappy time, like they're also having a crappy time, right? Like I don't need to be going here and trying to like, you know, follow them around and say like, why are you in a bad mood? Like you shouldn't be in a bad mood. I'm like, I'm in a bad mood myself. Like, let's let them, you know, express how they need to express. So there's been just a lot of, I would say in the last like month or so, like allowing the process to happen, like whatever that is, like if it's a tantrum, like if it's a crying meltdown, if it's like going outside and screaming, outbursts, like we adults have them, like we can't like mitigate our children and tell them they can't have the same things. They're small people also processing in a very different manner than we are, right? Because we have some of the tools to process the things that have just kind of happened to us, whereas children don't necessarily have all the tools to process that, right? Because they're also not seeing their teachers, their friends, they're also not in that routine that they were in. So yeah, it's been pretty hard, it's been pretty stressful, but I think we're now at a point, I would say like yesterday's kind of like, we're now in this, like we are coping mechanism of teleworking with children, and they're on summer break right now. But you know, it's probably going to get a little bit more chaotic when they go back to school. But I think right now is like allowing the release to happen, you know? Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think that I hope more parents are that forthcoming and that more honest with their emotions, because I do think that, you know, because we live in this white society, you know, from what I've seen and just being in different spaces of work, oftentimes we are pressured to suppress our, you know, truth and our realities, especially when it comes to emotions. I think that everything that you're saying is absolutely on point. And with that, so it's 4 points, or four major points that I want to get into. The first one is racism, and you touched on the second one a little bit, Amar, which is virtual education and learning. And then also the importance of community ties. And then lastly, self-care and working with the unknown. So with all of the stress that 2020 has brought with being in quarantine and the unknown, and, you know, children being out of school and having to work from home, and, you know, Quinton being on a sabbatical, like, you know, not being able to actually like fully enjoy it, which you have rightfully earned. With the targeted assassinations that were so visible in the news and in the media, with Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, with Breonna Taylor, that actually occurred way back in March, and her killers are still walking free. How has those issues heightened any sort of stress or anxiety that you all have felt personally? And then the second question is, how have you been able to discuss these issues with your respective children?
It's really complicated for us. You know, this has been an emotional roller coaster for us all, right? And just the disruption of, you know, normal ways of being, which weren't really good anyway, you know.
Right.
Like there's like, it's just a weird time where like I'm thankful for this slowdown, because like I just felt like shit was just moving way too fast, honestly. Like I just felt like go. I couldn't catch up. I just overwhelmed all the time. It just was too much. Just even down, just dealing with traffic, you know what I'm saying? Just to commute into different places.
Yeah.
It's like this is everybody's moving just so fast. And then but it took this to slow down. So it's like this weird thing. But for me, just personally, I remember when I saw the video of George Floyd, and I remember, and this is something I don't think we talk enough about, like just period. Like at some point we should talk about, as people, what are the psychological impacts of seeing someone murdered?
Come on, man.
Like,
come on with it.
Like I can't believe that no one's really having a nationwide conversation. Like we're not supposed to see people murdered. I've never seen anybody murdered before, killed, nothing. I ain't never seen anybody just die. Like we watch, and this goes back to Oscar Grant for me, right? Like the number of killings that we've seen because of cell phone footage and the increase of the surveillance state. You know, there's some like, you know, other things that happen with increased surveillance, right? Things that they weren't expecting to happen, right? Like they weren't expecting that all of these police killings and shootings would be recorded, right? Like that's, they did it, right? But that's one of the things that happens. And so I'm just sitting with just watching people take their last breath. Like it's
traumatizing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It does something chemically to our brains and spiritually to us too.
Yeah. So for me, when I saw the video and I saw George Floyd literally take his, like you could see him dying and you saw his body, boom, you knew he was dead. Like you could tell his breath, he was dead.
Yeah.
In that moment, I'm gonna just tell you like this. In that moment, my first thing was, I'm out. I'm done. I've been my family has been thinking about leaving this country for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I've been going back and forth with it. But that one right there kind of made me feel like, you know, I don't think that I'm staying here.
Yeah.
Like I don't know where I'm going. When I'm going, I want to move to Ghana, but that, you know, I just came from there, right? On a vacation before COVID, all of this have happened. So we're just thinking about it there because it's just not as violent. It's just not as, no place in this world other than a war zone is as violent as this country. Like this is just ridiculous, the amount of violence we have to deal with on a daily basis. And that's the overt violence. And there's all these microaggressions and shit. Like this is just wrong. This whole system is just wrong. So that was my first reaction. It's like, I'm done. That was it. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back type of thing. Like, okay, if I was on the fence, I'm over it now. Like at some point I'm out. I don't know when, but we're trying to figure that out right now. I just don't see the future here. I just don't. Like we'll see. But then, right, the flip side, you know, it took some time, but after a while, all the protests start happening.
Yeah.
And as a person I'm in organizing movement strategy spaces all the time, and you know we've been doing all types of stuff behind the scenes and you know promoting certain viewpoints and ideas and projects, and then to see like a lot of people just say, you know, fuck this shit, like I was hella juice, you know what I'm saying? I was like, yes, like I had great joy watching police cars be burned in the streets. So for anybody who wants to know where I stand on this, police abolition, that's who I am. Slavery needed to get abolished. It still isn't. We still have work to do. We still have constitutional work to do on abolishing slavery. We still have institutional work to do around abolishing police. Those things are a part of the legacy of slavery. So when I see shit like that happen, when I see,
with it,
yes, because we just watched a man get murdered two different times. One by white supremacist citizens, and then by police. We didn't see a Breonna Taylor, but we heard enough. And those of us in our community know that shit happens a lot. People call police, they come with these no-knock warrants, pointing guns at kids. Like that's happened to family members I know. Oh, this was the wrong address. Okay. See? Yeah. Some mistakes should never happen. But anyway.
Yeah.
So just personally, you know, we've been processing a lot and thinking about where we're going and what we're doing. But when it comes to our child, though, I've made a concerted effort not to involve him. Like we don't watch the he has no idea. And that was a conscious effort, like, because we sat down and we talked about it. And, you know, and I hey, look, I respect however anybody is moving through this time with their children. Because like I see a case to be made for both sides of it.
Sure.
We just made the choice to like not talk about it, honestly. And that's not like, my son already knows about racism. He has a very strong identity. He knows who he is, and he knows he's fucking been to Ghana. Like, he's 7 years old. Like, he's seen a different part of the world now. Like, and he actually wants to move, like, before all of this stuff happened. But anyway, he's real sensitive and he's real scared of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and then his birthday was coming up in like June. So like when all of this stuff started happening, we was like, I don't know, should we talk to him? Should we not talk to him?
Right.
Not sure. And so, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna keep that bubble. I mean, he got enough to deal with coronavirus and being in quarantine because he's scared of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, he real serious. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, like, you want to go and play with your friends? We can arrange it. Like just you and your one friend. Like, no, I don't want to get coronavirus. Like, okay, be safe. We'll make sure y'all social distance. But he's serious.
Listen, I know.
I can like hear him saying that. I can hear him saying that.
Right.
No.
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 But like, that was my approach to it. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's aware of social issues, but these particular moments right now, I was just like, you know what? I'm not going there with you. I'm sure a time will come where I will have to, but right now, man, I'm gonna let you enjoy your little 7-year-old life, because he's just loving life right now. He don't know shit. You're like, I'm at home, I'm playing, my dad's here, my mom's here. Like, this is what he liked. He liked to be around us.
No, I feel that. I feel that. Let these babies be and maintain their innocence as much as possible. What about you, Amar? What is your response to that question?
We're kind of similar to the point of like, we don't watch the news. We definitely try to minimize mainstream media news going on in the house. I don't want to hear about Trump. I don't want to hear about all this crap that happens every day, because I think, like, personally, we already know that. For most of us, we know the justice that we seek. We know the injustice is happening, like, at all times, right? If we're in this COVID pandemic situation, like, we knew a pandemic was going to happen for quite some time, and we knew Black, Indigenous, people of color, disabled, low-income folks were going to be most at risk of being harmed by these pandemics, by these viruses, because we were already hit hard with flus. We're already hit hard with just general health disparities. So this happening, seeing like what Q said is actual, like, violence and murder on screen is very traumatic to one's persona. So we don't allow our kids to have social media to begin with. They're limited on, like, the YouTubes or whatever. They can be on a kid's YouTube. We don't allow that in the house. But we talked about it, because it became very, like I said, I cry. So the kids ask me why I'm crying, and I'm going to tell them, like, not going to lie. And those are conscious decisions where it's like, having those, like, conversations, do we talk about this? Do we let them know what's happening? Do we not let them know what's happening? Unfortunately, like, my daughter had already experienced racism as a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, and like trying to process what that is, right? Was that prior to everything that happened this year? Yeah. So it was earlier this year, before any of the mainstream media picking up on this. So she, so there was conversations that we had been having to really be vocal about when you feel uncomfortable, right? Like, if something doesn't feel right, what is that? How do you vocalize that? How do you talk to your teachers if something's happening at school, or an adult, or somebody you feel safe with? Or, if you don't feel safe, can you come home and talk to your parents or your family members about what is happening? So we've had those conversations in the past. So we did talk about this. We made a decision to take our children to a march. We made some posters together, because I think that's something that I want to be an ally. I want to be a co-conspirator in supporting my Black and brown folks that are continuously being harmed and murdered in the street, right? Like I need my children to be equipped with tools. If they've already experienced it, seen it, like how do we continue to be transparent about moving forward? And then also, my particular work is in transportation. So Q, you mentioned like being stressed out about being able to move in traffic and just being able to have mobility options, right? Because the injustice that is happening to Black and brown people are generally on our roadways, right? So this is happening in our streets. These are public right-of-ways, and we're seeing murder, we're seeing violence by the hands of folks that are supposed to protect us. So how do you explain that to your children, right? Or why their father or their mother is scared of police, or what does the policing, create this like type of like violence in our own selves, like when we see or, just feel that authoritative like role in our body. So how do we explain that to our children? So we did consciously talk about it. And I agree with you, Q, because our kids are very sensitive. They're very like intuitive of like that trauma, and so it's very how do you say, curated on how we just explain things to make sure that they're also not harboring that, so they're not making themselves sick. Because my daughter has like this thing where she generally, I think, was internalizing things and making herself sick. So it's really being cautious and transparent to make sure that we can like move it out, right? So we're understanding it. Here are some tools on how we can work through this, but I don't know. Yeah, I think we're trying to be transparent. I definitely believe and support folks and parents that it's not the time and place to talk about it with their children, and you have to give parents their space to go either way or balance in between, because that's the decision that you guys have to make as a family.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that none Black, brown, or Indigenous parents, meaning white parents, this is not their reality. And and I usually I don't speak in generalities or generalized statements like that, but I'm going to do that one because I think it's very real. I really do not believe at all that white parents have had to think along these lines, nor have they had these, and both of you mentioned this before, but these like visceral, emotive kind of reactions that that Black, brown, and Indigenous people have had. I mean, essentially our whole lives, but definitely within the last couple of months. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that generational trauma. It's real. Like
it's very real. Yeah, it's very real. And we feel it intuitively, psychically. We feel it on a cellular level and a physical level too, right? Like, and our responses to it are very myriad, right? Or they're very diverse. And I feel like we're in a constant state of trying to grapple with our emotions and figuring out what is the best way for us to handle our emotions, to process them, and then to ensure that we can protect ourselves and protect our families and communities too. And that's just not something that white people or white parents really have to think about. Amar, you mentioned something that is really profound to me about the fact that these events, police brutality, what I call encounters with Karen, just these explosions of like racist events, they're happening on the very same pathways where Black and brown people are moving through. And you know what I'm saying? And it creates even more, I think, fear and even more trepidation a little bit in terms of Black people, brown people, Indigenous people being able to move freely in this society, right? And then all of that compounded with trying to safeguard and protect your children's minds and their little spirits. It's just like, because that was one of my questions, like, how much access, you know, do you all allow your children to have to social media? And like, I mean, I know the both of you very well, so I knew that you all weren't really allowing your kids to be on social media, but I know there are a lot of parents that do, and of course your children are a bit younger, but there's still a lot of parents who, you know, and this is not a slight to them or anything or a judgment, but a lot of parents, because it is the common thing to do, children are accessing social media, whether it's YouTube or Instagram, and definitely what's that new thing, TikTok. Like it is yeah, and you know, I know a lot
or
of
gaming, like there's that whole gaming
the gaming culture. Exactly. And so that exposes children to a lot of things at a very, very early age. Really quickly, Amar, you mentioned that you and your husband partner are, or you did participate in marches and things like that, and you wanted to expose both your daughter and your son to those events as well within the last couple of months. And that was going to be one of the other points that I wanted to mention about the importance of community ties. So both communal and familial ties, and how essential that has been in your life overall. But of course, especially within the last, within the last couple of months. So, you know, we as Indigenous, Black and Brown people, like community and family, I feel like are mutually linked. They're very much a part of our identities. It's a part of our spiritual system, you know, and they are one and the same. And so our physical community and social ties, they are a vital part of our experiences. And I personally feel like it's what gives us strength, and it helps us to be very resilient, especially living in this, you know, white matrix of supremacy. So, of course, you did participate in some of the marches, and so you are sort of passing down that ancestral legacy of being very active in your community, very active in society. You're passing that along to your children. If you and Quinton could talk a little bit about any specific communal groups, whether they're socio-political or even virtual, since we're in this, you know, state of quarantine, or faith-based groups that have been, I would say, the most supportive and nurturing for you and your children during this time.
I can touch on that a little bit. I think it's kind of ingrained in how, I don't know, I see and identify with a lot of Indigenous practitioners, Black and Indigenous practitioners, and brown folks who have like a communal support. That's how I was raised. And I, you know, that saying is, it takes a village, or it takes a community to raise your children. I firmly believe in that. My parents, like I said, were heavily involved in the civil rights movements, the Chicano movements. They facilitate a lot of work through, like, with their arts, from San Diego, Sacramento. And the same thing with Joe's parents. He grew up with his parents being, you know, educators and teachers and supportive of migrant workers, United Farm Workers Association. So we've always gone to marches as a community. And so the folks that my parents hung out with, those are my tias, those are my aunties, that I grew up with. You know, everybody's my cousin, because that's how we were raised, right? Even though we may not have direct, like, familial linkage, those are our familia, our cousins that we were raised with, right? So this is group that I can think of right now personally, how in Sacramento we were raised, like going to the marches, like, and if we couldn't go to the marches, like, how do you support folks that are protesting or fasting, you know? Like, how do you care for somebody else's children during this time, creating artwork, or spiritually, right? Like doing sweat lodges, danza azteca, singing. My background identify as Yaqui Chicana, so there's a lot of Yaqui heritage within the California, but the tribal linkage is down in southern Arizona through Mexico. So we were raised indigenously with California natives doing music and song and participating in that way. And so fast forward, you know, I'm still friends and we still call each other comadres and family with the cousins I was raised with, right? My parents' friends. And so we still try to have that linkage with our friends and their children, right? So now my kids are friends with their kids. And so we did go to marches together, right? We did create together to do that. And I think that's extremely important because we talk about social distancing. And I think that's been the hardest part is we need that, we need to hug each other. We need to love each other. We need to be able to embrace, have our barbecues, like going out and seeing Q in Oakland for his son's birthday party, them coming out here, like just being able to be with each other, you know, breaking bread, having a meal, having our kids play. So that's been very difficult, but we were raised in that kind of communal setting. And I think we try to keep that. And it's been very difficult with COVID not being able to do it. So at one point I was thinking about, we had, and we've had people that have passed away, not necessarily due to COVID, but other things that's been very difficult to not have that communal like mourning process, right? Not having a space where we can cry it out or hug it out. And we did a Zoom, right? We did a Zoom with some of my mom's friends and folks that are probably watching on Facebook. And it was just very healing, right? We were able to see each other, we talk and, you know, just have a good time. And it was very like therapeutic to have that release, not necessarily having specific support groups. I think that's probably my family's next step is trying to figure out more on support groups that our kids can have those, I guess maybe more virtual interactions with their friends. And then also some type of like educational interaction that's non-school curriculum, but like other curriculum that can support the curriculum that we want to teach them.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. What about you, Quinton? How have any of the communities that you're connected with, either faith-based, virtual, familial, how have any of those been supportive and nurturing for you and Allende during this time, and for Martina too?
Or thanks. For us, you know, we're transplants from the Midwest.
Right.
So, you know, when we came out here, Amar and her family were the only people we knew.
Right.
And
Right.
unfortunately, they live in Sacramento and we live in
Right.
Oakland. So, you know, we can't see them as much as we would like to. But, you know, we've made good strides over the years to keep our kids close as we could, you know, and they see each other from time to time. They play. And it's always nice to link up with them. But, you know, in between time, you know, we've been here for 10 years. And so we built up a network of friends here that have been very, very helpful for us as people who don't have family out here. But even with that, right, like at the end of the day, you know, it's different. Like, you know, family is people that you didn't know your whole life. And, you know, we're making relationships with people, but it's just different, you know, the boundaries. So it's been very challenging for us to have communal support in that way. I mean, just even from the time we've been here, right? And so like, this is not different in that way. However, what's been the most supportive for me is my organization, Movement Generation. I'm the co-director. I'm one of now 10. We have 10 co-directors of one nonprofit. And it sounds wild, and it is, but we deeply believe in collective work and responsibility. And we don't believe in bosses. Like, nobody needs a boss. Nobody wants a boss. Most bosses don't even want to be bosses. Anyway, you know, we all need to work and do work. And really, most people don't need nobody to tell them what to do. We can talk and agree how to work.
You would think, but you're right.
Hey, but listen, anyway, we'll get on that another day.
That's another Zoom.
That's another Zoom. But because we have this kind of like collective directed organization, we make the rules, right? We make
I love it.
And so one of the rules that we made, because we know our work and we plan our work, we are those people who choose what we do. We raise the money for, we do it all, right?
Right.
So there's no one to tell us what to do. And it's 10 of us and we value each other's opinions. So we're always going to come with some really good decisions because they've been very well thought out, right? So when we meet challenges, it takes a long time for us to decide things, but they're usually really good decisions. And we know that because we can look back on them and like, yo, was that the right move? Yeah, it was. Or we could have done it like this. But while I was on sabbatical, my folks at the job, they put in a whole bunch of different, policies and procedures for us to deal with this. So some of us went down. We're salaried employees. So we don't do no timesheets. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yo, we all have we work anywhere from 32 to 40 hours, depending on, what you want. You know what I'm saying? Like me, I have a consulting company. And so I need to reserve time to manage my company, right? So I do 32 hours a week at my nonprofit job. And my other coworkers, some do 36, some do 40. It depends, on what they want. So, but when this happened, we made a shift to working from home, which is not what we like, right? But it's a shift. And then there was a lot of different accommodations put into place for that. So like people could go down in hours and it wouldn't affect their pay. So you just go to work, do what you can do, and let us know how things are going. We're much more oriented to the person. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, how are we able to, what can we do as people first? Because that's who we are. We are responsible to each other first. And then we have this bigger movement that we're responsible to and we're accountable to as movement strategists and thinkers, right? But first and foremost, we're committed to each other and our families. So it was like a real conversation. Like, how do we support each other? Well, like those who can, continue to do whatever hours they do, great. But if you need to go down, do it. But that's not going to affect your pay. Like, I'm not going to penalize you. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's been so many times we've all went above and beyond with no extra money, right? And no complaints about it because it's the work we love and we value. So the work should love and value us too. And so when I came back to work, having that policy on the table allowed me to kind of re-engage in work. Even though it was hard, it allowed me to re-engage with a lot less stress. Like I didn't feel automatically that I had to come back and just boom, go straight to the 32-hour work week that I was doing before. I got time to figure out like, okay, cool. What can I take on and do well? And how can I shift and make this happen?
How can I prioritize?
So they've been a great support system. And then we do all types of cool stuff for each other personally. Like they've become my political home and my kinship network. And I do some work with a group called the Brotherhood of Elders Network, which is an intergenerational group of Black men. I've been a volunteer for them for a long time, but now they're one of my clients. So it's like working for your friends or your family.
That's
and
good.
that group has been especially helpful for me because I've been able to do a lot of help support a lot of direct service work because that group is a volunteer group. So like when COVID happened and we saw the disproportionate impacts on the Black community here in Oakland, they formed a response to it and they got other people at the table and they have this big effort. So like, I just can't stress enough to a lot of folks who are listening, like we're not geared or not developed through schooling and through the culture in America to be community oriented, right? Like, but it's really the only thing that we have, you know what I mean? And I just feel very sad for folks because I know there's folks at home right now who don't know how to cultivate community even within the home, right? You got to be able to cultivate community at home first, right? Like I have to be able to understand how to listen to Martina when she say, what I thought I did was right was not, like I have to listen to my son when he does that, right? When he says, Dad, that's not right, instead of talking over him or not listening. And they have to do the same with me. So and so for us, being in this moment is stressful, but I cannot imagine if we didn't like each other.
Oh, man.
I can't imagine if we didn't already have community built into the way our household is managed.
Right.
So I'm like, hey, everybody, if you didn't get it before, you must get it now. Like, this is what we have is community. And we have to cultivate community, learn how to be accountable to each other, how to say, I'm sorry, how to apologize, how to make amends. Most of us have never really seen people argue and get over it and make amends, which is really wild shit when you really think about it. Like, this is a part of human nature. Like, we're going to have conflict. So, like, we should have good models of what does it mean to resolve conflict. Like so much of us, our conflict is we don't ever resolve it. It's just grudges and anger and
it metastasizes and it
toxic.
grows.
It's toxic.
That is an excellent point. That is an excellent point. I think we've seen that play out in a lot of these marriages and relationships that have become severed during this time, right? Like it's been extremely heightened. And Yeah, now more than ever is a critical time for a lot of things to end, a lot of things to get pruned, and a lot more healthy, nurturing, authentically loving forms of community and family and togetherness, and to become the norm now. Because for a very long time we have operated off of ego and whiteness and patriarchy and that conflict, and not having the ability for people to resolve that is a part of that system too. It's a major part of that system. Yeah.
The only way we're going to really get through this, and this is why America is going to have a problem. The only way you're going to get through this type of a conflict is with care. You can't shoot your way out of this. You can't violence your way out of it. Like, it's not going to work. Like, these people are ridiculous. You know, it's just like with climate change. It's the same thing. Like, we don't get through what's happening with our ecological systems being eroded and what's coming down without community. The only it's just like what Dr. King said a long time ago: chaos or community. It's your choice, but it's going to be one or the other. Because and with chaos, you're not getting through it. You're just chaotic, and the problems are still happening, and they're getting worse. So it's like it's chaos or community at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it. That's just how we were raised, right? Like you said, this familial ties, like how we have a way to process and navigate through this time, right? It's either gonna be bust or you're gonna work through it, you know. And so in your home life, like you said, Q, like you have to like, again, I have that privilege of having a partner to help me, and you know, not help me, but we're co-raising our children, you know, like, and they're helping us, they're raising us as well, because there's a lot of stuff that you have to unlearn, you know, that's just ingrained in our society to tell you how to raise your children, and these are the things that you have to do in society, you know, that they but it's not working, and it hasn't worked in so long. And so I think when you look at a lot of Black and brown communities, we have this way to get back to your indigenous roots, right? Because all of us are indigenous. It's not just brown people. Black people are indigenous people, and so you have these ways to raise your community, your kids in community, right? And so whatever that looks like, you're able to kind of get through this. And I think understanding and learning from that, like you said, Q, it's either going to be chaotic or we're going to get through it. And when you talk about care, we're talking about health and well-being of our people around us. And you're seeing so much harm through our environment, through transportation. It's all connected. And you're able to see how we project onto our children, that also then fosters this like violent upbringing or this very careful upbringing, right? So you have these kind of divergence of our children being raised in toxic households that then maybe perpetuate that behavior, and it becomes this progressive, like, you know, outburst of ugliness. And so it's our jobs, I think, to be able to kind of stop that and change your path if you can, unlearn those behaviors, be able to learn from your children, because our children are, you know, they're not the future, they're the now. That's been said so many times. Like, they have these fundamental beings that they can communicate in such a way that we have tuned out a lot of the times. We have stopped listening to stuff that's very natural, right? You know, when we say stop being rude to your children, they're just saying things the way it is, right? Like, and if we can stop like ourselves from allowing them to just be themselves, you know, and I'm not saying being like completely disrespectful, like they just see things the way I think a lot of adults need to start seeing things. And unfiltered. I think this pandemic has really heightened that. You know, we're seeing our people being harmed in the street from this structural violence and racism, but it's also heightened with this pandemic. And like it you know, it's very traumatic for a lot of people. And I think I'm privileged to have that support that I've had so far.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amar. I 100% agree with you. I think that I know in a lot of my meditation and reflection, I have definitely felt very strongly like this is a time more than ever for Black people, for brown people, for indigenous people to return back to our origins, right? This is a time more than ever for Black communities, for brown communities and indigenous communities to decolonize our minds, decolonize every facet of how we live our lives, how we think, unplugging from toxic forms of media that constantly perpetuate these ongoing racist, sexist, misogynistic messages that continue to sever us from who we truly are inherently. And for us to then, as we decolonize our minds, decolonizing our diets, decolonizing everything that we're consuming, and then replacing that with what is authentic to us, authentic to our spiritual systems, authentic to the ways in which, what we were just speaking about, how we build community.